10 classified strike teams disbanded. Before anyone noticed, some military units are dissolved through ceremony. Colors retired, personnel reassigned, records archived. Others simply cease to exist between one budget cycle and the next. No announcement, no acknowledgement, no explanation offered to the men who served in them or the families who waited at home. What follows are 10 strike teams that were here one day and gone the next, disbanded so quietly that most of the world never knew they existed in the first place. 1. Strike Element Cobalt, West Berlin, 1963. Formed in the immediate aftermath of the Berlin Wall's construction, Strike Element Cobalt was a 12-man joint CIA Army unit tasked with maintaining covert extraction corridors for high-value assets trapped in the East. For 2 years, the unit operated with remarkable effectiveness, moving scientists, engineers, and intelligence sources across the border without a single confirmed compromise. Then, in the spring of 1963, 3 East German agents were found dead in circumstances that pointed directly to Cobalt's methods. Before any investigation could be formally opened, the unit was disbanded. Personnel were transferred to separate postings across 4 different countries within 72 hours. The extraction corridors they had built were never used again. No after-action review was conducted. The 3 dead agents were never officially acknowledged. 2. Project Lynx, Southeast Asia, 1967. Project Lynx was a 9-man reconnaissance unit operating under MACVSOG, the Classified Special Operations Command running missions too sensitive for conventional forces in Vietnam. Their specialty was long-range penetration into denied areas, territory where no American forces were officially present. In late 1967, Lynx completed a mission that their final report described as yielding intelligence of strategic significance beyond original mission scope. Command acknowledged receipt of the report. 48 hours later, the unit was formally dissolved. The intelligence they had gathered was absorbed into a classified assessment that has never been declassified. 2 members of the team attempted to discuss the mission through veterans' channels decades later. Both were contacted by federal agents within weeks and reminded of their non-disclosure obligations. 3. Naval Special Unit 14. Gulf of Tonkin, 1964. Before the Gulf of Tonkin incident that escalated American involvement in Vietnam, a 14-man naval special unit was conducting classified operations in the Gulf, monitoring North Vietnamese naval movements and, according to documents released through a 2001 FOIA request, participating in provocative operations designed to draw a response. When the incident occurred and the political fallout began, Naval Special Unit 14 was disbanded within hours of the first congressional briefing. Personnel were processed out through administrative channels so quickly that several members later reported not receiving formal discharge documentation for months. The FOIA documents were partially redacted before release. The sections describing the unit's activities on the night of the incident remain classified. 4. The Rome Station Strike Cell, Italy, 1978. During the years of lead, Italy's period of intense political violence in the 1970s, a CIA-backed strike cell operated out of Rome Station with a mandate to monitor and, when authorized, interdict far-left terrorist networks. The cell consisted of 8 operatives, a mix of CIA officers and Italian intelligence assets. In March 1978, former Italian Prime Minister Aldo Moro was kidnapped by the Red Brigades. The strike cell had intelligence suggesting the location of the safe house where Moro was being held. That intelligence was never acted upon. Moro was killed 55 days later. Within weeks of his death, the strike cell was quietly disbanded. 3 Italian members of the cell later alleged that the decision not to act had come from above the CIA station level. None of them could prove it. All 3 faced significant professional and legal difficulties in the years that followed. 5. Detachment Iron, Philippines, 1972. When Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law in the Philippines in 1972, A 7-man American intelligence unit embedded within the Philippine military structure found itself in possession of detailed documentation of the planning process. Evidence that the declaration had been coordinated weeks in advance and that certain American officials had prior knowledge. The unit's commanding officer filed an immediate report to his superiors. The report was acknowledged. The unit was disbanded 4 days later. All 7 members were reassigned to administrative positions in the continental United States. The documentation they had compiled was seized during the reassignment process and never returned. When one member later filed a records request for his own service documentation from that period, he was informed that the relevant files had been destroyed in a routine archival purge. 6. The Saigon Technical Team. 1975. Every week we uncover classified operations buried before the world could ask questions. Subscribe. The next mission goes even deeper. In the chaotic final days before the fall of Saigon, a 6-person technical intelligence team was tasked with destroying classified equipment and documentation that couldn't be evacuated. Their secondary mission, according to internal records that surfaced decades later, was to secure a specific set of files from a South Vietnamese intelligence archive. Files that documented the names of American assets who had been compromised and, in some cases, deliberately burned. The team completed both tasks. They were among the last Americans to leave the compound. Upon returning to the United States, they were debriefed individually, separated, and their unit designation was dissolved before any of them had filed their final mission reports. The files they secured were never entered into any access. Cyber Intelligence Archive. 7. Counterintelligence Team Bravo, West Germany, 1981. An 8-man Army counterintelligence unit stationed in West Germany began identifying what they believed was a significant penetration of NATO communications infrastructure by Soviet assets, a network that, based on their analysis, included individuals operating at a senior level within the alliance. They compiled a comprehensive report and submitted it through proper channels. The report was returned with a single notation: assessment inconsistent with current intelligence consensus. Discontinue investigation. The team's commanding officer resubmitted the report with additional supporting evidence. Within 30 days, Counterintelligence Team Bravo was disbanded and all 8 members were reassigned to non-intelligence roles. 3 years later, the Walker spy ring, one of the most damaging Soviet penetrations of American military communications in history, was exposed. Whether Bravo's report had identified elements of the same network was never officially addressed. 8. Signals Detachment Epsilon, Cyprus, 1974. During the Turkish invasion of Cyprus in the summer of 1974, a 5-person NSA signals detachment stationed on the island was intercepting communications from all parties to the conflict: Greek, Turkish, Cypriot, and American diplomatic channels simultaneously. What they intercepted on the diplomatic channels in the 72 hours before the invasion began suggested that certain American officials had advanced knowledge of Turkish military intentions and had chosen not to warn the Greek Cypriot government. The detachment filed an urgent report. They received no response. The invasion proceeded. Within 2 weeks of the ceasefire, Signals Detachment Epsilon was disbanded and its members were transferred to postings across 3 different continents. The intercepts they had filed were classified above top secret. They remain so today. 9. The Honduras Liaison Unit, 1986. During the height of the Iran-Contra affair, a 7-man military liaison unit operating in Honduras was facilitating the logistics chain that connected American intelligence operations to Contra forces in Nicaragua, a chain that Congress had explicitly voted to defund. When the affair began unraveling publicly in late 1986, the liaison unit was disbanded within 48 hours of the first news reports. Personnel were returned to their parent units with orders to make no statements regarding their activities in Honduras. 2 members later provided testimony to congressional investigators. Their testimony was classified in its entirety and has never been released. The unit's operational records were destroyed prior to any formal investigation. The destruction was later described in official documents as routine records management. 10. Task Force Meridian. Gulf War, 1991. In the weeks following the end of Operation Desert Storm, a specialized 12-man intelligence team designated Task Force Meridian was conducting battlefield assessments in southern Iraq, cataloging destroyed equipment and evaluating the effectiveness of coalition operations. During this work, the team documented evidence of what their reports described as undisclosed pre-war contacts between American officials and Iraqi military leadership. Contacts that suggested certain aspects of the conflict's outbreak had been anticipated and potentially facilitated. Their documentation was submitted through classified channels. Task Force Meridian was disbanded 8 days later. Members were returned to their units with standard debriefing protocols. Their assessment reports were absorbed into a classified archive. One member, in a privately published memoir that sold fewer than 200 copies, described the disbanding as the fastest I ever saw the military move when it wasn't shooting at something. 10 units. 10 disbandments so swift and clean, they left almost no trace in the public record. The pattern is consistent enough to suggest not improvisation, but protocol. An established procedure for neutralizing units that accumulate knowledge the system has decided is incompatible with official narratives. The men in these teams were not enemies of their country. Most of them believed, until the moment of disbandment, that they were serving it faithfully. What they discovered in the course of that service, and what was taken from them along with their units, remains locked in classification levels that may never be lifted. The machinery that disbanded them operates on a simple principle. The most effective erasure isn't destruction, it's silence. And silence, applied with enough précision and institutional authority, is indistinguishable from the truth never having existed at all. If this opened your eyes, subscribe to Battlemap. New missions drop weekly, and the next one goes even deeper than this.